Good morning, guys. It's Miss Megan. It's Sunday, May 4th, and this is lesson 31. And no, you're not confused. You didn't miss anything. We're skipping lesson 30 of our lessons because it is all about the Day of Atonement, and we talked about that a lot back at Easter time. So we're going to plow on ahead to lesson 31, which is our last lesson in the book of Leviticus. And this is lesson 31. God requires holy living. So our key verse for today is Leviticus 19:2, which says, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy." And our key central truth is that God requires holy living. So what does that mean? We know that God is holy. The Bible tells us this over and over and over again. But what does holy actually mean? So holy means pure and separate, which means that God cannot be around sin, can he? Because sin is definitely not pure. So this is why Adam and Eve had to leave the garden, because they sinned when they ate the apple of the tree of good and evil, the knowledge of good and evil, and God had warned them not to do that because they would know too much. And they did it anyways because Satan said to them, "Oh, it's okay. God just doesn't want you to know everything so that you won't try to be like him." But there was a reason God didn't want them to eat that fruit. And when they did, they had to leave the garden because they did exactly what God told them not to do. And that was a sin. And so they couldn't be around his perfection anymore. So in this picture, you can see how sad they are because they are leaving what was a beautiful and perfect place where everything was beautiful and good. And now they had to leave and they had to go work really hard. And they had things that were really sad that happened to them. And that's what happened because of sin. That's what happens to us. This is why God cannot be around us unless we have Jesus in our hearts, because remember, he cleansed us of our sin by being perfect and being the perfect sacrifice for us. But even though that we can't be perfect on earth, we can still do a lot of things to try to live holy lives that are pleasing to God. So there are a lot of ways we can do this, and a lot of ways that God talked to the Israelites in Leviticus. He gave them a lot of ways they could try to be holy, and we know that they're never going to be perfect at it, but there are things we can do still today, and these are really good things for us to remember. So one of the things we can do is to honor our father and our mother. And that's one of the 10 Commandments, isn't it? That must mean it's really important to God. So when our fathers and mothers or our grandparents or our teachers ask us to do things, we need to have good attitudes because they're usually asking us to do this for a reason that's really good. And so we can honor them by saying, "Yes, sir, yes, ma'am," and doing what we are told or following our parents' rules. That's one of the ways we can also honor God and to be holy. Another way is by caring for the weak. And so who are the weak? So in this picture, this is the little girl you see is one of the little girls that our church serves in the Dominican Republic when we go on mission trips. A lot of the children in the Dominican Republic don't have a lot of money. They don't have a lot of food, and they certainly don't have money to buy a lot of clothes. And so some of the people at our church sew and make beautiful clothes and dresses that we send down with our team that goes to the Dominican Republic. And this is a little girl a couple years ago receiving her dress that was made by people right here at Central. And so another way we serve the weak is by caring for the elderly and the homeless. This man right here in this picture is both of those things. He is homeless, and there are things that we can do and missions we support right here in Huntsville that help people who are homeless and love them and feed them and clothe them and give them just a lot of love and help them learn about the love of Jesus. And also here you see this from when we talked about the sanctity of life a few months ago, back at the beginning of the year. That seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? But we talked about the unborn children who just need a lot of love and care and protection. We've talked about orphans and how we can, as a world, just love those who don't have families, and also just by praying for others and protecting people who just don't have a lot in life going for them. And it's so important. And there's so many different ways we as Christians can take care of those who are weak. And God has been talking about that way since the beginning of time, back in the book of the Leviticus, and just the way that the Israelites had to take care of others. So another way we can live holy is by being fair to everyone. That means to not cheat people. Here in this picture, you can see this man is weighing out a payment. He's making sure that when someone gave him, looks like they gave him oil, and he is giving out grain. That was the way they paid. They sometimes didn't use actual money. They would trade goods and services. Things that one farmer would grow, he would give to another farmer who would give him a different product that he had harvested. So this man here is weighing out to make sure that it's exactly balanced, and that the people who are giving him money are receiving that much in another good in return. And that's just one of the ways they were able to be fair to everyone and to treat everyone fairly. And also, the Bible tells us, and we think of this phrase a lot as something Jesus said, and he did say it. We are to love our neighbor as ourselves, but this goes way back to the book of Leviticus when the Israelites had left Exodus, that God told them to live like this. So we are to love our neighbors as ourselves. But who are our neighbors? Well, our actual neighbors are our neighbors, the people who live around us. We are to love them and to care for them when they are sick or hurting or sad. We are to do that, and they are our neighbors. But also, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan. In the book of Luke, chapter 10, he talks about a parable about a man who was wounded, and people just left him by the side of the road. The priest went by, and he didn't help him. The Pharisee went by and he didn't help him. They had things that they thought were more important to do. But the Samaritan, who was a man who normally wouldn't have talked to this man because they were from different cultures, and a lot of times different cultures back then didn't talk to each other, or they didn't respect each other. But this man who was from Samaria knew the right thing to do was to help this poor wounded man, and he took him to a lodge and paid for him to be taken care of. And Jesus says that this man was a good neighbor and took care of his neighbor. And so they were neighbors even though they didn't live anywhere near each other. So that tells us that actually everyone is our neighbor. So we are to love everyone the way we would want to be treated, right? And that just makes perfect logical sense. Jesus is really smart, and everything he says usually can help us live better. And some things are harder to understand, but when we really, really get to know and think about what he's saying, it all makes sense because it makes sense because that's the way God designed the world. So these have been a lot of things to think about. There are a lot of ways that God asks us to be holy. There are a lot of commandments we are asked to follow, and it can be a lot, and it can be really confusing and feel overwhelming. But basically what God is asking us to do and telling us to do is that we are supposed to do our best to follow God's desires, because his desires all come from his love of his creation and his love for us and the love that Jesus showed us on the cross. So the better we are at doing that, and the better we are at following God's laws and the things he asks us to do because he knows what's good for us, the happier we're going to be, right? So let's go ahead and look at our craft for today. Our craft today is a puzzle, which is so fun, isn't it? We love puzzles. So you're going to have this piece of paper that you can download from our Google Drive, and you just need something to glue it onto, or you can just keep the puzzle pieces separate and just play with them. But we're going to go ahead and glue it on like they suggested. So you have a piece of paper, you have your puzzle pieces, and then you're going to color those like this. Kaylin colored these for me. And then you're going to cut them out and glue them on a paper, and then it's going to end up looking like this. It's super easy. It's not too hard to do, and it's a fun little craft. So I hope you guys have enjoyed our lesson today, and we will see you back here next week when we are going to start the book of Numbers. Bye, guys.